program is from NET, the Public Television Network.
Last month, NET invited a group of 11 people, blacks and Jews, to take part in an experimental dialogue on relations between the two groups, relations which recently have been the subject of much attention in the national press. They were told they could take as much time as needed to try to get past the rhetoric and fears that have divided them, to try to reach some understanding of each other. They spent 11 straight hours together before our cameras in Washington, with only short breaks between each of 4 sessions. The next 2 hours is an edited version of what took place there. Helping run the dialogue are Charles Seashore and P. Bertrand Phillips, psychologists with the National Training Laboratories Institute of the National Educational Association. Participating are Paul Jacobs, political activist and writer from San Francisco; John Hatchett, teacher and central figure in a black-Jewish controversy at New York University; Charlotte Robinson, teacher in an anti-poverty program in Grand Rapids, Michigan; Lou Smith, president of Los Angeles Operation Bootstrap; Naomi Mandelbaum, a teacher from a Detroit suburb; Sid Finley, Chicago field representative for the NAACP; Ed Solomon, principal of a Harlem junior high school; Laurie Rodell of New York's Urban Coalition; Dick Cohen, associate director of the American Jewish Congress; Murray Saltzman, an Indianapolis rabbi active in civil rights; and Milton Huffman, merchant in Washington's black community, whose store has been burned down twice. NET Journal presents Some of My Best Friends.
Perhaps I, as in the last measure a poet, in the first measure a merchant, in another measure a member of the populace, in another measure a citizen of Washington, in another measure just one human being amongst other human beings, I'm best qualified to start this. And for that purpose, I'd like to read a poem that I have before me that I'm sorry I found the cause and the necessity for writing. It was written on April the 6th of last year, shortly after the assassination of the Reverend Martin Luther King. It was written at the site of my former and present business at the corner of 9th and 8th Street Northeast. It was written looking at the cinders that were there instead of the merchandise and the fixtures that had been there the day before, merchandise and fixtures which I felt had been honestly used to serve the community as well as myself. If I may have the privilege, I'd like to read them. And I'd also like to read the comment that is below it. It is called From the Cinders. Cinders black relating to my neighbors, and rain won't fall in any color tonight. Though some accept this as expiation for slavers, and some believe that this wrong makes a right. Are blacks less blind than whites, who engage in actions, blindly dealing blows where sense suggests? Here are friends who did befriend the doer. Here is one so different from the rest. How shall peace come where there are two humans who do not understand that God's command decrees that each must be a better human if both are heir to reach the promised land? Pray God that there shall come just one tomorrow, that men shall see through eyes both blue and brown, that naught contributes more to human sorrow than forgetfulness, that every child's God's own. And underneath that are the words composed Saturday, April the 6th, one day after viewing the burned hulk of what once had been art young menswear, and respectfully dedicated to all our friends and neighbors and to the memory of a great and noble man. May he rest in peace. To the Reverend Martin Luther King. I hope that this requires no comment on my part.
I think it requires a lot of comment on your part, because it doesn't, to me, say anything as much as it raises a lot of questions about what you really felt. If I'm not a merchant, but if I had a store that had been burnt out, presumably, and destroyed, with all your merchandise and the other things that you mentioned had been destroyed in that fire after serving the community and yourself, as you put it, all these years. At least from my own point of view, I wouldn't have sat down and written a poem. I think I would have been madder than hell, and would not have been satisfied, from my own point of view, with writing a poem which seems to be some kind of a cop-out. It's a cop-out because you were apparently ashamed to be mad, because something inside you felt that you shouldn't really be mad. I think the poem expresses to me again, a very artificial kind of emotion. It says, they burnt my store, they destroyed what may have been thousands of dollars of life savings and so on, so I'll write a poem and say we should all love each other.
I think what... Maybe I better answer this question first, please.
I'd like to hear the answer to the question. That one.
Yeah. In the store with which I am associated, Art Young's at 9th and 8th Street Northeast, because we recognize that 99% of our patronage is from people who are brown or black or tan, and I try not to put too much emphasis on color, because to me character is of a little more importance.
You did it even in
We employ only members of your race. We don't employ any white people.
Which race do I belong to?
The human race.
Hope you don't have a mind.
That isn't the context in which you meant that.
I didn't.
Now be honest.
I didn't mean it.
No, he's right. Be honest, for crying out loud. When you said your race, you meant a black man or a Negro, a mulatto, whatever the hell he is. Don't say human race. That's what I mean by a cop-out. You're not honest with yourself.
Mr. Solomon, Mr.
I'm Mr. Solomon.
He's Mr.
I'm
Solomon.
sorry.
I'm Jacobs.
I'm Jacobs.
Solomon.
I won't remember anyway. The pride of authorship we're sensitive to, I'm sure. But what you were doing was, in a certain sense, posturing, creating and rationalizing feelings with a sense of guilt that seemed already inherent in trying to justify yourself, perhaps as a Jew, but as a person with a point of view that you're going to accept everyone here. I'm not sure I'm going to accept everyone here. And it's not the issue of posturing or reading statements or poems, but, coming to grips with what are we really saying to each other. I think that's, and what do we really feel about each other within our own selves? This is the issue.
Also, I didn't really come here to talk about Martin Luther King. I came here to talk about Jews and blacks.
If we can get down to what the person's term, the nitty-gritty of the situation, but I think that perhaps some sort of historical perspective is needed. Now, I'm perfectly willing to discuss black-Jewish relationships, but on my own terms. And my terms are these, that first of all, you have to recognize that my ancestors were brought here not as persons. Let's get that straight. We're brought here as animals, as beasts of burden, so that euphemism slavery did not apply to us. Now, it has taken us almost 400 years of our own striving, not with anybody else's help, our own striving to try and become what this country said we were not, namely human. In the process, from so-called slavery, through Reconstruction, through the World War I, through World War II, down to the present, certain persons, like myself, have decided that we have to have some sort of roots, and that the most important thing to root ourselves in is our own blackness, our identity as persons of supreme worth. Now, obviously, in the process, a lot of people are going to get hurt, that is, both verbally and physically.
Why?
Very simply. we were spawned in a country that was founded on violence. We were not special creatures. We were not immune to that kind of violence. So why all of a sudden, when blacks resort, as some people say they do, to violence, why the surprise? Because we're no longer docile beings?
Mr. Hatchett, we were prepared to jump on Mr. Hoffman because he was doing. Isn't the kind of general somewhat of that, that country was founded on violence? Unquestionably, there is an element of violence that was intrinsic and indigenous to the one based on a concept of violence. If violence is finally the absolute alternative available in America and nothing else, then this is a waste of time.
Yeah, but we were talking about, John, I thought was going to start talking about Jews.
May I address my...
Did I break you off?
It isn't really a waste of time
Before
because
you get to that, Jack.
it isn't really a waste of time because you could join me in it. You see, I feel so trapped in all this bullshit that goes around saying violence ain't the way, And I'll give you examples of that. The Black Panthers in Los Angeles were trying to buy guns, and let's bring it to the Jewish community. And they were appealing to Jewish liberals for money to buy guns, okay? And they were told, "Oh my God, you don't do those kind of things." But those same people packed Hollywood Bowl and bought guns for Israel. So I feel kind of like, there's a separate standard set up for me over here that no other American has to go through.
Here's the crux of the matter.
I'm not even
sure that's the perception.
About that police,
The
and he
perception is
indiscriminately,
different.
while I'm working for
I
law
agree with
enforcement,
you.
he'll beat it out. He's not he's actually indiscriminate about who's his
Then
enemy.
you should. That's why I
So
said
are
you
you.
should get your gun and join me.
In Indianapolis.
Just a moment.
It's a
black
Jews don't burn.
Just
They
a
don't
moment.
riot. They don't-
See,
Mr.
that's the kind of
Hatchett,
stuff
that's
that
Do you differentiate in your own mind, honestly, between a Jew and a white? In other words, when you say Johnny Jones is a bigot, all right. Now, when you say Sidney Goldberg is a bigot, do you honestly make any differentiation? Is it important to you that he's Jewish too? Must the appellation be put on?
The differentiation I make between him is that he's a bigot, and I hope to God that I'm not. That's the differentiation.
But you say the two are the same in your mind.
Most certainly.
All
Most
right.
certainly. I don't
If,
differentiate
by the
here.
way,
A
we
bigot
all
is a
agree
bigot.
to that. I mean, if I ask each, Lou, if
No,
I
I
ask
could-
you the same question,
If you would have asked me the same question many years ago,
How
no.
How many, Lou?
I'll just give you an example. Like I grew up in a West Philadelphia ghetto, you see, and I had my own image of a Jew. No matter as a teenager and pre-teenage, and
that's what I said earlier,
yeah,
remember?
I
Okay.
had my own stereotype of a Jew. He owned a store. He was a hustler, and I tried to hustle him, and he wasn't just a white man. He was a Jew.
Why? Because you knew no other. You knew no other.
But
Your
if you will
contacts
let
were
me
with no
finish
other. I'm
telling you
sorry,
how
go
I
ahead.
feel about it before you tell me how I should feel about it.
He's right.
And I knew he was a Jew because he was closed on Jewish holidays, I knew he was a Jew and a white man on top of it because his kids didn't go to my school. We went to Martha Washington, which was all black. And even though he lived in our community, he went over to Blankenberg and Leidy high schools. I knew he was a Jew. I just, somehow or another, you get your information. And to me, that was all a Jew could be. In my world, there were no other Jews. Since then, I could say now, I don't care what he is. I don't question that about him. I may kid, with Paul sometimes. Are you Jewish, Paul?
I'm half Jewish. My parents were Jewish, but I'm not.
But I'll say this, as a kid, in my ghetto and in my gang world, damn right I had a stereotype of a Jew.
But now I'm asking. In other words, when you discuss it
I
now.
said, when I discuss it now, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Why Jews? You asked why Jews. Now, I think it's wrong when a black guy gets attacked for saying, when a black guy is accused of being anti-Semitic because he says the school system of New York City is run by Jews. I think that's a fact. The school system of New York City is being run by Jews. What becomes anti-Semitic, though, is when you go one step further than that and you say the reason that he is doing this is because it's part of a Jewish plot.
I didn't say what you suggested.
No, I
Al
didn't say you
Van
did.
didn't. Les Campbell didn't. The thing, and we are the three persons thus far, by no means alone, but thus far in New York City who have been. I've sort of faded into the background. Now Les Campbell and Al Van are getting the brunt of what I have come to call a very vicious and very unprecedented attack. And the things that we have in common, that is Al, Les, and myself, is a compassion for the welfare of black youth. Now, despite our particular idiosyncrasies, we do not allow that compassion, or we have not allowed that compassion to turn into a passion against Jews.
It
You see,
sounds
this,
like it.
hold
Let
on.
me finish.
This
Let me
is
finish.
what
Sounds like
this
it.
is what Jews have said and have tried to convince people of. Your organization, for instance, level an attack that I have not witnessed, in part to raise funds. This is one of your functions, to excite the Jewish community
No,
to
on
the
contrary.
presence, just a
I'll
minute,
tell
to the
you,
presence
No.
of so-called
Look.
black anti,
John, I think we owe each other at least this.
No,
I don't
read
have
it.
a right to interpret what you
I read
say, although I do have a right to tell you what kind of an effect it has on me. I hope you'll grant me that. And you don't have any right to interpret what we do, except in terms of how it appears to you. If you
Oh,
say
yes, I do.
we're exciting the Jewish community to raise funds, that's ridiculous.
Why is
isn't-
it ridiculous?
Because it isn't true, and because it betrays a lack of understanding on your part. That's
out to
very
me-
discouraging.
Point out to me the basis for the attacks on the black male teachers in the New York public school system.
Say that
Beyond that
when you
fact.
say that Jewish teachers are trying to castrate black children.
Mentally castrate.
Well, okay, mentally castrate, and that, and when you make it very clear, at least as we interpret it, that it's a part of a Jewish conspiracy
Who
to
used
keep
the word
black
conspiracy?
kids
That's
down.
your
You have said
interpretation.
that. You have said that it's done on purpose.
I have never
Ralph
used the
Pointer said
term.
it. And,
Oh, Ralph Pointer.
well, okay, and Van and Campbell too.
They have never used the term conspiracy.
Now, let's talk about what's really happening. What's really happening? When I see examples, and I'm sorry, I have it in the motel room, I could have shown you examples of the reactions of children today, black children. For instance, in the first week I was in a school as a principal, there was a trespasser picked up. Now, when you pick up a trespasser, the law requires, and this was a boy not in the school, a boy who had 17 previous arrests. The father came in the next day. Now, I'm brand new here. He opened the door of my office and said, "You white Jew bastard principal, Hitler didn't burn enough of you." Now, why was I a Jew bastard principal? You see, I was a white principal.
Italian. That's why you're a Jew bastard.
He didn't even know my name, and let me tell you what's happening. That the teachers in New York City, since we have constantly done this, we say the New York City school system is Jewish, Jewish, Jewish. Now, you use it because it's emotional. You don't have to reason. You don't have to be rational. Why, you can say, "You lousy Jew bastard," and right away you got something to go at this individual with. I'm a Jew, you see. Whether Paul says he's Jewish or not, he's stuck with it. You bet your life.
I'm Jewish. I'm proud I'm Jewish.
I was ready
Welcome
to make
back
a
to the
bris.
fold.
Be careful.
Yeah.
I can understand that happening since every teacher I ever knew, every teacher I ever had, from first grade to through high school, every teacher, every official teacher was Jewish. One makes an assumption that all teachers are Jews. And the mass of black people in the ghettos of the North never run across any other kinds of Jews. And for someone who's in the educational system, to be surprised, and that
I'm
was
not
like
surprised. I've made a statement.
That's 20 years ago.
I want to
when I
bother
was
you
in
with
school.
something.
We
Can
were
I ask
calling-
you something?
We were calling teachers lousy Jew bastards 15, 20 years ago. We were calling a pawnbroker a cheap bastard when he didn't give us enough for the record player that we had to pawn to pay that caps for the rent, that we didn't get because the caseworker, who was Jewish, didn't come through with the bread.
Now I'm going to say this. See, now this is anti-Semitic. If you interpret that to be so, then maybe we can get to what's wrong with us. I maintain that there has been a deliberate plot within this country to keep black kids dumb, ignorant, and uneducated. We have some ideas about how to teach, you see. See, we take the dropouts of the school system, and make computer programmers out of them in 1 year. But no, you won't come to Los Angeles and find that in the schools, because we have not yet been able to muster the power to take those schools over.
But you have not answered this problem
So
of
we
why
don't have-
everyone who is bad is suddenly a Jew.
I don't know anything about that problem.
Well, this
You better
is
work
right.
that out with New York people.
No,
Nobody
and
has
that's
made a
true in Detroit.
generalization that everybody who is bad is a Jew.
Well, this is so in Detroit, too. In the Detroit ghetto, the word Jew seems to be used if it's a bad landlord. If so facto, it's the Jew landlord. In fact, if they don't like a black man, they call him the Jew black or the black
All right,
Jew.
listen,
I think
here's
a
your
lot of that
reason
has
why.
to do with the resistance of that first line I was talking about.
In
I'd like to
Indianapolis,
hear what she has to say from the hinterlands about
yeah,
why-
Indianapolis too next, if I may.
The point is, the dealings in the Midwest, if you want to call Detroit that, I'm from Grand Rapids, the dealings that most black people have in a community with a Jew is in the capacity of a boss. He is the one who has the money, who runs the store. He is the person who is usually the ghetto landlord.
Yeah, would like to make a couple of points with respect, since I'm from the Midwest, Indianapolis too. In the Midwest, generally speaking, the population of the Jewish community is less than 1%. I think you can speak of Jewish power in New York and Los Angeles.
You can't in the Midwest.
No, you can't. Chicago, I guess. But Indianapolis, we're less than 1%. There really isn't a great deal of power. Today,
And not strategic, I take it.
not strategic, no. Today, the Jews are concentrated largely in professions. They're not in the stores. The stores have been taken over by large chains. The Jew is moving and has moved out of the retail business rapidly. There are Jewish merchants and there are Jewish landlords in the slums, but the largest slumlords are Indiana University, the Indiana National Bank, major white Protestant institutions. And yet in Indianapolis, the epithet Jew merchant is used not by blacks, but by a particular group of blacks. By and large, the relationship between the black and Jewish community is very good.
The real enemy is cultural lag.
Right now. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's this identification of the oppressor and the Jew that begins to, I think, tear apart the Jew and the black community.
I was right.
Is it
We're not about to end the issue. We had two things before us. One was some clarity about where we were on the issue, and I don't think need any encouragement for Bert or me to get going on that one. The second is what's happening to us here in this group. We haven't gotten for ourselves clear on what the concerns are in a way that we can deal with them. Why don't we take 15 and come back and see how we go the second round?
I say hi first.
I'd like to ask a question, before we get into something else. And I've never been quite clear on it. I'd like to hear from a Jew what he considers as anti-Semitism, his definition of anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism is racism. The irrational thrust. Why do you place the term Jew in front of anything? Anti-Semitism comes out of the Christ killer idea. Now, what you're doing is simply saying, well, I got some other handle that I can bang this guy over the head with. And so what I'm doing is, he may be an exploiter, he may be a poor teacher, he may be a crummy doctor, he may be all these things. But the irrational thrust, how do I answer the fact that I am a lousy Jew dash? What do I do with the word Jew? And it's racism.
And you cannot blunt it with any other thing. Why get into any discussion about the reason that I is a Jew? No, I as a person am against it because it only gives the next guy the chance to be racist about the black, the Indian, the Mexican, etc., and so forth.
Point of information. I got to ask, just a question. In other words, you don't want to be referred to as a Jew.
Not if it's an irrational mark. If you say his religion is, fine. But if it comes up, in other words, I don't want you to say, well, he's a Jew principal. I object to it. What's it got to do with the price of fish?
I don't agree. Well, it shows you, we all have another notion about it. And what I find as a radical, horrendous about anti-Semitism is that it seems to me to be a reflection of black people picking up the worst aspects of the white society that I abhor. Now, that's why I don't accept the notion that what you have to do if a black militant organization, or it doesn't even have to be a militant organization, publishes an anti-Semitic poem, or a poem which is conceived of with some legitimacy as being anti-Semitic, I think there's only one thing to do, Dick, and that's not to take ads in the New York Times. It's not to publish these kind of things. It's to get down, right down here with this guy and say, look, I'm not the enemy because I happen to be labeled as a Jew. The enemy's out there, all a goddamn miserable society we're both trapped in. But what's happened has been, Lou, is that now, because of the political situation, the anti-Semitic question has come back on the agenda, and all Jews, in my belief, in America, all Jews, are somehow deep in their consciousness, they really believe that they're on a temporary leave of absence from a pogrom.
I have the impression.
I'll let one more.
I have the impression that Negroes think that Jews are hung up on anti-Semitism too much. Is that your feeling?
And this is the hysteria that I read in the press and elsewhere, that all of a sudden, black, in quotation marks, black anti-Semitism is on the rise in the black community. It's becoming virulent. It's poisoning the system. It's poisoning the body politic of the country, and it has to be stopped at all costs. I really don't understand this. We may be. I will grant that we may be, to a certain extent, anti-Jewish, vis-a-vis Jews in the United States of America, and more precisely vis-a-vis Jews that we come in contact with in our day-to-day activities. But to say that we are anti-Semitic and condemn an entire group on the basis of their religion, this is the sheerest and the most denigrating kind of fabrication that I have ever encountered. If I say nothing else at all today, I want to say that.
But John, that's really not so much the issue, because the real problem is not to describe the phenomenon, which I think you describe accurately, and which I don't disagree with your description. The real problem is, what do people who are in positions of leadership do vis-a-vis their own communities in this kind of a situation? One of the tasks of leadership is to explain. Yes, it's true. We people who live in the ghettos have to deal with Jewish slumlords and Jewish gunners who steal from us in the store and the credit and all the rest of us. But they're not the only ones.
You're saying what he said to you. He's saying don't stereotype me.
No, I'm saying more than that. I'm saying he's got a responsibility.
Okay, so let's go on from there. Okay, you're both saying don't stereotype us.
People that these people are meeting. I do not belong to one organization. Well, the pawnbroker.
So you said these are not the only people these people are meeting. Who are these people?
The black people in the ghetto. Because I do not today belong to one organization in Detroit, whether it's Congress, ORT, Hadassah, National Council of Jewish Women, who have not got, at my temple, groups of women working in the inner city. And one of the things I must admit, you talk about criticism. Well, there's positive criticism.
I think what you better do is check the level of inner city that you're talking about, because that's another phraseology.
All right. I am talking about schools in the Detroit inner city where there are many, many women, Jewish women, who are working on a personal basis, a one-to-one basis, with children. I know that some of my own Jewish students who are working in interracial committees. In other words, I do not agree at all that the only Jew that you see in the inner city is the pawnbroker and the shopkeeper, who very often is not even Jewish. There are other people working in there, and I haven't heard one word about these people.
Naomi, when I was a kid, I'm telling you the truth. I wouldn't lie
But
to
you know these people
Yeah, but you know,
What are you
the times they
talking
are
about?
changing.
No, I want her to understand one thing, and that's all, just one thing. That the agencies those people are working in are the agencies that are hated by the inner city people. You see, that's the very thing that Paul wrote about in his book, Prelude to Riot. And we make this great big mistake of thinking that we trot our little hindparts down to Watts.
Not me.
And we sit in our inner city, Detroit, etc. And we sit in these little agencies, and those agencies are hated by the black people on the street to begin with, which complicates your problem. You see,
even if they were loved,
the
numbers involved,
don't give me the idea that
possibly
exposure
offset, there's years and years and years and years, and constant involvement with landlords and pawnbrokers and shopkeepers and social workers and caseworkers and all them other mothers.
I want to get at certain facts. One, instead of the use of the term anti-Semitism, let's assume that we are in a semantic, and good Lord, forgive me, hang-up. And we have this problem for it. We have this problem of the use of the term anti-Semitism. Maybe it's a wrong term. Does it still make the anti-Jewishness any better or worse? Because John said, we are not anti-Semitic, we are anti-Jewish. And I think herein lies the telling point. I'd like to know, what do you mean you're anti-Jewish? Wait, no, I'd like that.
No, because
I don't
ask every one of us
What I
here
mean
who
is that
happen
the
to be
average is
Negro or
Semite,
black,
so if you're pro...
whether or not we're anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. And all of us will tell you unquestionably we are not.
Not what?
And are not anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. And I venture to say that I stick my neck out this far, but I say take a poll right now.
No, I asked John. He had made the statement. I didn't ask you.
He said he was anti-Jewish.
He said he was. He said there is
He
anti-Jewish.
did not. He did not say this.
I'm sorry.
That's what I gathered. If he didn't say it, then I
Let's
withdraw it.
ask him,
It's interesting what you hear.
do you consider yourself, John, do you consider yourself to be anti-Jewish?
He didn't say he.
Wait.
I'm asking about him.
Let him answer.
No.
Okay.
Can I
Who are you?
Communication is
Can I
a
ask-
difficult thing.
Are you, Lord,
He's a member of the tribe.
anti-Jewish?
I was when I was 12, and the way
Are you
John-
now, the Lord?
No, not
All right.
now.
Are you,
Wait,
Charlotte?
Wait a
What
And
does
I'm
that
not.
prove? I'm not anti-black.
Neither am I.
wait a second.
So what is it?
Well, maybe we need some anti-Semitic thinking black people in here.
Follow just as soon as you get through.
Right. John made it very clear. We went into this whole thing about the black experience and the black reality vis-a-vis, its relationship to Jews in the ghetto, right? Right. And that, Jewish merchants and all them cats that we deal with in the ghetto, in that context of the ghetto, people have got to be anti-Jewish, right? Because the guy who's doing it to them, they're anti-white, right?
Can I ask you one question?
First,
No, because I must stop you
Because
here.
the people who
No,
are
I
doing
must
it-
stop you here.
All right, stop me.
Are you? Let's assume I go to.
I don't live in that kind of ghetto anymore.
Wait. Let's assume I go to a ghetto.
Yeah.
Which does not. Offhand, I can't think of one because I don't know all the urban ghettos. But let's assume I go to one in which the exploiter or the exploiting class is not Jewish.
And they'll be
Do I?
anti-Italian.
No. No.
The hell they won't.
No, they will be.
In Indianapolis is Jewish. It
I'll tell you that in San Francisco, wait a minute, in San Francisco, he's right. In San
talking
Francisco,
about mass media.
no, wait a minute, in San Francisco, the black community is anti-Italian. They talk
Yeah,
about
but in-
Aliotto and his goddamn mafia running the city. There are no Jews there, it's Aliotto.
And they'll be anti-Irish.
Don't blame that mass media on us. We don't own it.
Incidentally, I don't think, could I just say one thing, John? Paul, he went around the room, he said, now, are you anti-Jewish? Are you anti-Semitic, Smith? No. Are you anti-Jewish, Hatchet? No. Are you anti-Jewish? No. And then he says, and you white people, are you anti-black? No, not me, I'm not anti-black. I love blacks.
Nobody said that.
I didn't say I love it. I said
You're the only guy that's saying it.
You said, they said we're not anti-black. Is that enough?
Just to show the meaninglessness of the
I
statement.
want to touch on.
Right.
They
Yeah.
may not be anti-black, but they are racist. As all white people in the continental United States are racist. And this
I don't know what
is
that
the
means.
fact
I don't know
that we
what
have
that
to
means,
face
Paul.
up to.
What does that mean?
What does
I
that
have to
mean?
You see,
correct.
if you could, if
They
you, what does
do
it mean?
are
If you let me
anti-racist
finish about
because
why
all
this
black
is so,
people in the United
you
States
conned
are
us.
anti-racist.
Oh,
I don't
You did,
understand
because
these
you should
things.
have asked one other question.
You conned
If you
us,
asked
and
me
you know
how
you
I feel
conned
about
us.
people in this room as whites, and I would probably give you another
Yeah,
answer. I don't
Look, if
particularly
I
like
am
white people.
No, come on, don't con.
I'm anti-black, baby.
Yeah, don't con us. You know, don't give us, you know, about how sweet and how we're all.
I don't
we all
love white
each
people.
other.
Meaningless.
God damn it, we don't all.
I don't
love
either.
People, unless I happen
Then
to
why
like
use the
them.
term Jewish?
This is
All right,
where-
let's stick to it now. You got it. Now, why use the term Jewish? Why add it?
Refer to a
Now,
Jew
would you
in
remind me
positive,
about 2 hours?
and if I refer to him in a
We're not ready
negative,
yet.
then, you know, it's bad. For example, you know, when I went to Israel, they made it very clear to me that they wanted to be referred to as Jews.
Right.
And never again did they not want to be able to stand up and say, I'm a Jew and I'm proud to be a Jew, you see. And you see, now if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to say, boy, look at that Jewish scientist, wasn't that beautiful what he did, then am I also allowed to say, look at that Jewish bastard and what he did?
Right, but you don't
But is
mention
that
the
anti-
scientist. You don't mention the scientist,
Oh,
you
I
just
don't?
mention the bastard.
Well, then you
And
don't
should
know
have.
much about black history then at
Well,
all. You ought to just listen to our
I'm-
spirituals where we mentioned it. And what really is existing is our power struggle right now, and we might as well lay that on the floor, and we can't hide behind black feelings or Jewish feelings or any other kind of feelings. Right now, the black community is demanding control over certain institutions within its community. Right now, it is the economic system. This may shock you to know, but there is a great deal of planning being done of how we're going to take on the mafia, because they still control our vice, you see, and that's, we're going to be called anti-Italian. But we want control of our schools first, and secondly, we want control of the economics in our community, and we want those two things now. And it's that whole transferring of power where we rubbing each other. And it just so happens in too many cases, it is Jew and black.
We know something about the black community. And I get a feeling around this circle here that there are people who are not accepting, you know, what we know it to be true, you know, right? I mean, like, here we are talking about it, and someone's saying, well, I don't know about that, you know. I'll believe anything you tell me about the Jews. I will. You know, sorry. Anything, you know, this collective group says about Jews and the Jewish experience and the Jewish reality and the whole thing. But this is no good at all, you know, unless you're going to accept what we say about the black.
I'm willing to accept it.
And
That's a way I would see what's happening here in the group. And I see it as us being in a worse dilemma, I guess, than one that you're stating, that we are so sick and tired of trying to explain it to somebody who isn't listening that we don't need very much evidence that they're not listening before we check them off.
I really honestly would like to know, why do you say I'm a racist? On what basis? Or anyone? I mean, you said me and Mrs. Mandelbaum. You know, how do you evaluate this?
Well, earlier, we spoke of being honest, you know, truthful.
Not lying.
Truth of the matter is that I'm like the late Gandhi. I simply don't trust the overwhelming majority of white people with whom I come into contact.
Well, what
I
is
mean, if
it?
I
That's
sit
what
here,
I-
if
what
I
is it
sit
that I'm
here
doing?
and call you a Jewish bastard, that's an attitude I possess.
What is it that I'm doing?
But the calling you a Jewish bastard isn't going to rob you of your dignity. But when an entire country says to every black person, man, woman, and child, somehow you just don't quite measure up, that does something to them. It kills us physically, it kills us mentally, it kills us in every way. And this is what has been happening
that
to
by
us.
the statement you're making.
See, this is what's been
Because
happening to
you're
us.
not willing to identify or able to identify, to tell me, what am I doing? You want to permit me to generalize, and I don't want to generalize. And here, he's generalizing about me.
I'll get
Do
specific.
you challenge day in and day out? Are you willing to lay your life on the line for me? Do you challenge the racist institutions? Do you get out there day in and day out?
Maybe I've done more than
and
you.
do
How do you
this?
know that I haven't?
I can answer your question
The question
another
is,
way.
does it make any difference?
Yeah, you're not allowing it to
Does it make any
difference
Not
to
to you, John. Does it make any difference to you, for example, that the American Jewish Congress or B'nai B'rith or any of the organizations have fought, have picketed,
or that I have put my life on the
lobbied,
line?
have taken...
Can you keep it on
Right.
these two guys here?
Have taken cases to court, or do you dismiss that?
We do have options, but when I say you, yes, I am generalizing. But if you want me to personalize, I can call you by name. But I'm saying that what happens, we do have choices before us. But racist white America has never allowed us to exercise these choices. There are three choices we have. Three choices. And by expressing it in this fashion, this is not so much anger, this is the way in which I articulate. It's not anger. The one choice is total physical separation from what some of us believe is a country so rotten it's not worthy of integrating with. That's one choice. That is the acquisition of physical territory inside the continental United States. That will be ours. We will run it as we see fit. That's one choice. The second choice is what I call psychological separation. That is, this miasma of racism is killing us. We don't want to have anything to do with it. Now, there have been enough critiques out on it, so I don't have to go into that. I think it has been positively critiqued. That others who are white have said that this is a racist society and that the chief problem of the continental United States is white racism. I didn't just say it all by myself. All right, so the second choice is a psychological separation from this kind of condition. The third choice is integration. Now, United States, each time we have tried the choices, the response of white America, even though the rabbi here says he's not directly involved in this response, but the response of white America is
no. I'm asking you. You called me a racist. I want to know why.
I'm explaining why. The response has
But
been
then you begin
to
to
integration.
generalize.
No. Now, we can do this in partnership or by ourselves. That is, we can save it in partnership, or we can, I may be able to convince Paul Jacobs to come on over to my side and help me, if we feel this is a choice, destroy it down to the rock bottom.
Many of us are trying to work it out.
I'll give you examples.
We are trying, John. I don't think
This
sometimes you give credit.
dialogue is taking place because somebody, somewhere, some nationalist, somewhere, I guess he's a nationalist, I don't know. Suddenly it's out of vogue for black people to say anything about Jews, then it becomes anti-Semitic. But I maintain this. When I was a little kid, baby, little kid, the Jews in Strawberry Mansion hated our guts. To a large extent, proof of the matter is, as soon as we moved in, they cut out. But I didn't see any dialogues going on about anti-Negro feelings in the Jewish community. And I maintain that right in Los Angeles today, outside of a few cats who'll get up and, but on a scale such as this, where was the concern?
I wanted to ask a question and come back to what John Hatchett said. He said there were three choices. I'm asking it, let's assume that I am a white racist in America, but that now I have a genuine desire to do something positive. Now, we've banged around here yelling at one another about how evil each of us is. I'm not interested anymore. I ask simply, there are three choices. If you agree that there are three choices, and we have three different groups in the black society preaching these three choices, and I am an official in serving a black community, and I am presented with these three choices, where do I go?
You get.
No, I'm asking. I'm not asking you. No, I'm asking Lou or John Hatchett. I'm asking him.
I got a right to answer that question because you see what you do as the principal of a school affects my life just as much as it affects his.
Where do we go
That
with
we aren't able. First of all, it's hard for us to say that. See, because we always think the racist is the
in
bull
that
conners.
sense, but where do you go from there?
Then
Stop.
what we do is try to figure out, A, how we got here. And that's not easy because the history of this country has been falsified.
You went through that.
B, ask yourself about the institutions that you deal with and of which you're a part. He's in a school system which is rotten, miserable, utterly destructive of the people in it. The one thing in New York City that you'll find in common between the very poor and the very rich is they don't want their kids to go to the goddamn schools. That's the one thing that's...
I got to interrupt.
Yes.
You're telling me, I just learned something from John, and you're telling me to negate it. I'll tell you in what
let
sense.
me finish then. I'm sorry if I get wound up on this, but you see, when we examine the institutions of the society in which we participate, that means every institution of the society, then what you have to be doing when you get back to Indianapolis is about as follows. You got to go down to the welfare bureau, to the welfare system. Look, you can't shake your head. You want to know what you can do.
How do you know I'm not doing it?
Well, I assume you are now, but you got to go to the welfare system. You got to go to the educational system. You got to go to the unemployment offices. You got to go to the health offices, every single health offices. You got to examine every single institution of the city of Indianapolis. And when you examine those institutions, you will find that as they impinge upon the life of the poor, and especially of the minority poor, that this notion of racism, this notion of white superiority over all other groups, and the notion of a kind of a white manifest destiny, this is a white man's country, actually has functions inside the very fabric of the institution. It's in its codes, it's in its employee relationships.
Okay, let me just
now,
tell you one thing.
So the answer then is what has to be done is that white people who are concerned about their own institutions have to do something inside their institutions.
You're not listening.
Are you talking about black anti-Semitism?
No, you see, I have a greater freedom.
Excuse me. Are you talking about black anti-Semitism?
Do.
It seems to me we're completely departing from our subject.
I start picking apart the institutional fabric of the society. That's when you see this saw. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of saw that when you pull it like that, you see an eruption of pus, and you can give it a gigantic shot of penicillin, and that'll disappear. It's much more like it's a disease that affects the very fabric of the society.
Now we're really talking about the issue and facing up to it, and what you're bringing up. And we've been talking around it up until now.
The question.
Well, no, he's bringing up the issue of the institutionalization of racism, which I think, begins to deal with one of the basic factors. I don't think the basic factor is the antagonism of Jew for Negro. Even if I were to grant that, I don't think it would mean a damn to the problem ultimately, because the Jew just doesn't have enough power to count in America vis-a-vis the black question and black freedom and black dignity. So that I think it is really the racist nature of the institutions of America that have to be confronted.
It's coming up on 6. I think we ought to take a break and give ourselves and the good people around us some peace and come back here in 15.
Who's going to eat?
Eat? What are you talking about eating? Is anybody hungry? You've been eating. Come on. You had a nut. Right?
Maybe we might start with Lou and Naomi, who were talking at the end, continued to meet for a while here.
Do you think it would do so much damage to black children if there was a white teacher working under a black principal?
I think that depends entirely upon the teacher.
So it's not a question of race. I ask you, John, and you, Lou, and every black person here who claims to seek black authority and black responsibility, do you feel that black is a qualification that a teacher must have in order to teach in black children, or not?
Let me tell you, the point is, when The school, we were being taught by the white teachers in an almost all black school. You weren't doing us any good. So why not give us a chance? We were just as hurt mentally and physically when you were teaching in a predominantly black school and there were no black teachers. Maybe a janitor every once in a while, a kid could see that great image, you know, shine, shine, shuffle, shuffle. But we were just as hurt as you claim to be now.
Can I,
But if you say that they were lousy Jewish teachers, I'll agree with you.
They were lousy teachers.
And they were lousy teachers. The question is whether their whiteness or their Jewishness disqualified them from being a teacher today.
Mr. Smith, you and Mr. Hatchett, in view of your ages, are both products, at least in some measure, of an educational system that included white teachers.
Mm-hmm.
You are a man, I would say, and I say this without prejudice, of brilliant mental dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
The man who sits next to me is a man of brilliant cultural dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Yet each of you have had white teachers.
And I was thrown out of high school in the 12th grade as being uneducable, and that's the extent of my education.
Then you had
they
a stupid teacher who did that.
And they a whole series of them. And then they shipped me off to a vocational school to finish up in the manual arts.
Now, I take issue because if you want to tell me what's wrong, spell it out. Don't tell me what's wrong, that it is lousy, because you're making a generalization you have no right to make. Don't tell me that you have destroyed the black child. I'm not going to defend it on your basis. How the hell can I? On what? What am I going to defend? I'm going to beat my breast here and say, look at the marvels. We produced Jonas Salk. He went through New York City. He went through City College, and he gave us this. I can do the same stupid argument that I feel is being done here, and I think we ought to quit it.
But Ed, now, see, what I don't understand, because I wasn't there, I suppose, to understand it, is what I don't understand is how did this attack by blacks on the teachers become a Jewish question, pro or con? Maybe somebody could just give me a little history about this.
Because Mr. Hatchett and others identified these teachers as Jews.
Not as we do say in Los Angeles, we identify them where the Mexicans call them Anglos.
No, they were identified as Jews.
And presumably then, just ask a question, I'm serious now. Presumably then, if Hatchett and the other people who were mounting this attack, if they had said, you know, we got to get rid of these bloody hunkies, or these damn Ofes, or these whites, then the Jewish community would not have said, this is a Jewish question.
They should have said they've
Huh?
gotten rid of these lousy teachers. Why didn't they just say they're lousy teachers?
Yeah, but simply this, that in a school system that is controlled by Jews, and it's a fact, in a school system in which you have an organization known as the Jewish Teachers Association.
The what?
The Jewish Teachers Association, 20,000 or more strong, which means that they don't mind, under certain circumstances, being identified as
There's
Jews.
a Protestant and Catholic Teachers Association, too.
Yes,
Okay.
but I'm focusing
All right.
on this in
There's
response
also
to his question,
Afro-American
an African American.
All right.
So we want
We
to
don't
be
deny that.
identified. This is my point, and I'm trying to answer Paul's question. We felt that, why not identify Jewish teachers as Jewish teachers?
This is a sickness of the Jewish
Why?
community.
All right, let me exercise for once a personal prerogative. The thing is that I didn't start this. It was already there. Now, I focused attention on a situation, hoping that some clarity would come out of it, and what happens? I'm labeled by his organization, among others, not his organization alone, but his 3 organizations, as writing an article that expresses, and heavens knows what this is, black Nazism. You see? Now, I wasn't prepared for this kind of paranoia. And I think I have done damn well under the circumstances in terms of not responding to it in a violent, vicious kind of manner. But specifically to answer your question, I can't answer it because I really don't understand it. If Italians can openly admit that they controlled, by virtue of being Italians, the sanitation department, then why can't Jews admit
by virtue of their control of the school system, that as Jews they control it, not as whites.
Well, John, if you felt that by identifying the Jewish teachers as castrating education of the children and committing genocide on those children, if that was your idea of how to start a dialogue with the Jewish community and have some nice talk on how together, arm in arm, we can go black and white together into the future, that's crazy. And you should know better.
You know why it's crazy?
Why?
Because you accept the thesis that somehow criticism of Jews is, you can't do this.
This is some criticism.
The Jews are the people of the book, and we take words like genocide and castrate and other words very seriously. In the second place, I think you put your finger on it yourself. John, I don't believe you're anti-Semitic because I believe you and I like you as a person. But when you say that these children, he was taught not by a white but by a Jew, that reveals so much about you and about this bag, this hang-up that you are in. I got hang-ups and yours. I'll tell you why. Because that teacher didn't have Jew on his forehead. He was white. That teacher that you had was white, white, white. You couldn't tell. You said a few minutes ago, you couldn't tell he was a Jew.
Now, for the first time, and you say be honest, you talk about honesty, the first time I am angry, we have much more justification for fear of genocide than any other group on the face of God's earth. Because 200 million of my ancestors were either killed or destroyed in some other fashion during the slave trade, both by white Westerners and by Arabs. The preponderance of it was done in the white West. Those who survived, those who got to the ships, when they found out what was really happening to them, they killed themselves rather than submit to that kind of degradation. And you're going to tell me that words do destroy. Well, if words do destroy, then no black people should be in this country. That's right. No black people should be in this country if words alone destroy.
There are two things I'd like to say. One, that, I think a black man has certain antennae and is sensitive to that which is going to impinge on his blackness. And in the same way, I think Jews have antennae, and they have certain conflicts and ambivalences in the area of their Jewishness, which I hope you've seen demonstrated today. And this antennae right away senses that here's a possibility, because the second point is, for people to really communicate meaningfully and understandably, there has to be a quality of confidence in the relationship. You know what I mean? I think there's a lack of relationship. And this is the most that perhaps we can accuse you of in this situation is insensitivity.
Wait, insensitivity? Wait, racism. Ralph Ellison wrote a beautiful book called The Invisible Man, right? And I accuse you all of racism, of not recognizing the visibility. What the teachers do with those Yiddish remarks, they don't speak Yiddish fluent.
Do they really?
Right, what the teachers do in talking about those kids sitting in those 35 seats as though they weren't there, as though they didn't know what a Schwarzer was, because their mama knows what a Schwarzer was, because she does day work for them, right?
You have a right to make that criticism and to make that attack upon this Jew. I'm not denying that. I make that attack from my pulpit.
I hear blacks saying, look, we're choosing the time, and we're choosing the dimensions, and we have the right to do that, and we're choosing the weapon, so to speak. And, I hear the Jewish group saying, but, we've always had the opportunity to be a part of that with you, and it came out very clearly in what you said, I think, Murray, and now you're saying we don't have that right.
I'll give you an example. In SCLC and ACP Corps, I was deeply involved in them. Now, not right now, but about, I'd say 4 years ago, stay out. I was told to stay out. I was initially perhaps perturbed because I wanted to share this. I, from my point of view, feel that my destiny as a Jew and as American is inextricably connected with the destiny of what happens to the Negro in this country. I can't separate it. The way senses that here's a possibility, because the second point is, for people to really communicate meaningfully and understandably, there has to be a quality of confidence in the relationship. You know what I mean? I think there's a lack of relationship. And this is the most that perhaps we can accuse you of in this situation is insensitivity.
Wait, insensitivity. Wait, you know, racism. Ralph Ellison wrote a beautiful book called The Invisible Man, right? And I accuse you all of racism, you know, of not recognizing the visibility. What the teachers do with those Yiddish remarks, they don't speak Yiddish food.
Do they really?
Right, what the teachers do in talking about those kids sitting in those 35 seats as though they weren't there, as though they didn't know what a Schwarzer was, because their mama knows what a Schwarzer was, because she does day work for them, right?
You have a right to make that criticism and to make that attack upon this Jew. I'm not denying that. I make that attack from my pulpit.
I hear blacks saying, look, we're choosing the time, you know, and we're choosing the dimensions, you know, and we have the right to do that, and we're choosing the weapon, so to speak. And, you know, I hear the Jewish group saying, but, you know, we've always had the opportunity to be a part of that with you, you know, and it came out very clearly in what you said, I think, Murray, and now you're saying we don't have that right.
Here an example, in SCLC and ACP Corps, I was deeply involved in them. Now, not right now, but about, I'd say 3 years, 4 years ago, you know, stay out. I was told to stay out. I was initially perhaps perturbed because I wanted to share this. I, from my point of view, feel that my destiny as a Jew and as American is inextricably connected with the destiny of what happens to the Negro in this country. I can't separate it.
I think that the rabbi, through the course of this discussion, several hours, probably appreciates that better than anyone else in the group who is, you know, better than any other non-blacks, except for maybe this guy who already came with keen appreciation of it. My man over here, you're on cloud nine. I mean, I have to say that. You're not, as far as I'm concerned, in here in this room. And I'm not even sure if you're trying to get here.
I'd like to provide you with a little answer.
That's what I mean.
Just a moment. I wrote this on Thursday evening when I first received a call
exactly
for this
what I
program.
mean.
Now, just a moment.
You didn't know I was going to be here, did you?
No.
No, all right.
I knew human beings were going to be
You
here.
can't do that.
And I addressed myself to something that I feel the
That's what
rabbi
he's
should
at. He's at
have, the
Thursday
rabbi
evening.
should have addressed himself to. And that is that we are addressing ourselves to something that should be non-existent in America. And that is that there should not be any racial antagonistic differences between us. In 1969. I'd like to read this, and I ask your tolerance. Please listen.
No, I won't listen.
Well,
Turn me off. As soon as you said I wrote this last Thursday.
Excuse you.
You didn't know I was going to be
Exclude
here.
yourself.
Or anybody else here.
I'll address
was gonna
this
be
to
here.
everybody else. Exclude
right.
yourself.
Me
out too, baby. And there was left one man and one woman on earth, and the two were not as one. For the man was kin to the color of night, and the woman akin to the sun. And the woman shrank from the man and cried, and the man just stood and stared. And they heard a voice speak to each of them. It is so because I cared. You see, my whole world was destroyed in fire. Every man, every woman, by hate. But I saved you two, each one of a kind, and hoped that you two would mate. If you only hate, you will both expire, and there shall be nothing left. All that I loved will be ended in fire, and the whole world will be bereft. Just one thing shall make my whole world whole again, such a love as I give you two, and I'll make you blind to each other's skin and create my world anew.
That has all the wrong answers. I won't comment on the poetry.
The poet always has wrong answers.
Yeah, but it seems to me that I couldn't agree with that in a million years, because to be blind to his skin is to
the answer.
insult
You
him.
want to be blind to your
I don't want
Jewishness,
him to
too.
be
That's the
blind or
problem.
deaf to my Jewishness, or as I express it, I don't want to be blind to his blackness. He's got a right to it, and it's great.
As
Just
a
as I
poet-
want him to be respectful and understanding of mine. This thing is crazy.
As a poet uses the words blind to skin, he means, if I may interpret, to be tolerant and
Hey,
compassionate.
would you think we were getting close to beginning to zero in on the target? Like, I'd like to ask you a question. Did it ever occur, you in the American Jewish Congress said it, I was just wondering, did it ever occur to you or has there been any discussion about supporting these cats in their idea of getting self-determination for their schools?
Yes, the answer is yes. The answer is that when the school strike was on, we called on the school teachers to go back to work. We're the only Jewish organization to do so. We passed a resolution and announced it publicly in support of decentralization as a measure as a way and a technique and an instrument of improving and increasing the participation of parents in the education of their children. And we weren't the only Jewish organization to do that. The reform rabbis have done it, and so on. And I think
Now, I want to carry that one step further. Here really is that when we hit smack into the economic arena, and I'm going to stereotype and generalize a bit in here, that the Jewish ally who was with me for integration of the restaurant, I wonder if he's going to be there with me if in my attempt to get economic control of my community, he has to attack some Jews at that level. And when we attempt to get, teachers that are relevant to our kids, be able to understand it's not because the teacher is a Jew, but because the teacher comes from a different environment. Would you be with me if it meant economic harm to those Jewish teachers at that point? And that's what I'm.
if it meant that 1,000 teachers in New York, or any number you want to mention, 1,000 Jewish teachers, 1,000 teachers, 80% of whom say, if the ratio persists, are Jews. If it meant that 1,000 teachers were fired because upon investigation and due process and legitimate study, they were found to be lousy teachers who could not relate to their children in the class, I would say fire.
Certainly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that there are ways, and we have proposed ways, of establishing some kind of measurement so that the teacher doesn't get his tenure after 3 years and automatically continues for the rest of his life. That's no good. I'm with that entirely. But what I'm against replacing this teacher because he's white and putting a black in there, ipso facto, without any indication other than the fact that one is white and one is black, that the black is better for the black child. That's what I'm against. I'll fight you on that, not on the first. Is that clear?
Are you going to go back to
I'm very honestly.
The issue that I saw that does connect the two for me was your statement, really not that you can trust his organization, but that you don't know, on the basis of your history, with other people, other experiences, whether there's any reality to trusting Dick. And that's the issue.
And I think
you were
he has
trying
a
to
point
say,
there.
Sure.
Because
but
I think you're
the
not
issue
going
is,
to
I don't know
find as many
Well, so
Jews going with you
you're
as you
asking,
found
at
in
this
integration.
point, maybe you're asking too much. See, because I think everybody came here, certainly I came here at least, with certain set notions in my head about who the people were going to be here. And I was prepared without having met them. It wasn't a question of liking or disliking, but I certainly had some fixed ideas.
Your Thursday night poem.
I had a fixed idea. Now, and I think everybody had a fixed idea, right? Now the question is, the need that became very apparent very quickly, at least for me, was to junk as fast as I could most of the notions about the people who were here. I mean, I certainly had to junk the notion I had of Hatchet, because I
did too.
Everything I got
I
out
told
of
him
the
very
only thing
early.
I knew about Hatchet was what I read in the New York Times or in the internecine, interminable, insane arguments that go on in the pages of the New York Review of Books, which review each other.
It's called the New York Review of Vietnam.
Yeah, or the New York Review of Vietnam. So too, I had a picture. They tell me when Willis said to me, "Going to have a rabbi," I had a vision in my mind. I was going to be one of them organ toning cats, guy who talks like he's standing next to an open grave all the time, And here I think of him. See, he's the NAACP. That's the goddamn Tom. in the operation, because that's, you know, out where I live, the NAACP doesn't, it's not such a hot thing. Now, it takes a while then to get rid of these kinds of attitudes and begin to understand and to listen more carefully to what's being said. And so I'm not certain that we can get any more out of a scene like this than a willingness to take the next step, which is to make the demands on each other and keep testing until we do achieve this mutual.
Well, I don't know how you heard what I was saying.
John, can I ask you this question? In terms of what I said before, how far I'm going to go or willing to go as honest as I can be at this time as I conceive it, are you willing to at least go any distance with me? Or because I hedge at one point, are you saying, okay, the hell with you?
You, at this stage of the game, you're not my preoccupation. You see, I'm not preoccupied with you. I'm preoccupied with black people and doing for black people, you see. Perhaps at some distant future we may come together again as me as a man and you as a man. But at this stage of the game, I am a black man in search of my identity in order to recover the humanity that your folk, meaning whites, stripped me of. Now, in the process, I can care less about you. In this kind of search, you're out of it. And I admit this.
I don't think it's possible to put me out of it.
I admit this.
I don't think it's possible to put me out of it and you truly gain your humanity.
Oh, yes, I can.
I don't think so.
Because I'm going to do to you, perhaps, what
You accuse us of losing
Ellison in Invisible Man said that you
Justice,
did to my people.
But in so doing, we have lost our humanity. And the charge that we have lost our humanity by depriving you, just like the Nazis lost their humanity by murdering Jews, that's a correct charge. You're saying now, you've lost your humanity, I'm going to lose mine, and after I've lost mine as much as you've lost yours, then we can be together. And I think that's very destructive and nihilistic. Because I think that the process is the product. The process is the product, and we've got to make that process decent if we're going to be decent.
The reason I'm ignoring you is because you're
John
missing my
said
point.
he was going to get and seek his humanity.
Well, here we're saying as part of his
Yeah, but we're saying he can't
But
do
listen,
it.
we've
He
got to
can't do
go
it by saying
back.
others are not
We've
human.
got to
Just
find
like
ourselves.
whites
We've
couldn't
got
do
to
it.
go all the way
Fine,
back
but you
and
gotta
start
find
from when we
ourselves
were in
first.
Africa and when some of us
Right,
were
right.
princesses
No
and
one's
princes and kings
no
and
one is
queens and what
disagreeing
have
with
you
that.
in those societies, so that we can start to find out where
Okay.
we belong right now. We've got
Okay.
to find out who we are, where
Fine.
we're going. We've got to find ourselves.
Right.
You cannot be involved in finding me. You are white. You're a wasp, whatever you want to call it. You are white. You cannot be involved in finding me, Charlotte Robinson, a black woman. No, never.
All right, now Murray
But he's a human too.
He's human.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's not.
And you're human.
Nobody
and we
has-
share, if we don't share negritude or Jewishness, we share some measure of humanity. Otherwise,
We're not saying, throw you out, you aren't human or anything like that. What we're saying, give us a chance. We want to find out who we are. You're not black, so you can't be included in that part of the we.
There's one point that I'm not very clear on, and that is Murray and Dick and their vehement rejection of, what was said by Charlotte, and what John said in terms of blacks getting themselves together. And your seeming rejection of you
I'm
not
not
being a
rejecting
part
it.
of that. I didn't understand
Well,
that.
no, I'm saying including in blacks getting themselves together is the confrontation and the real confrontation with whites. I don't think it can be excluded.
Rabbi, I don't understand that. I really don't understand that. I get in this feeling again, this, this attitude that's being expressed here. I hear all the time that niggers are, the Jewish burden in this country, and that, you need to watch out for us, and make sure that we get it ready and get it right. Otherwise, we might go off off someplace and come up with something weird and strange, you know.
Well, you didn't get that here, did you?
I am getting it here, right?
What do you mean?
John and Charlotte, you know, talked about the need for black people to develop their own identity. And while we're doing that, we have to do that. While we're doing that, we really can't be dealing with you or anybody else, you know. I mean, like,
but that's not real. You have
mean
to
that's
be
not
dealing
real?
with
You guys
it.
went 20 years in the
real.
desert all by yourself to do it. Why isn't it real?
Because we were...
You left Egypt and went out and developed the whole thing, right?
Because it was in a desert and there was nobody else around us except the sand. But you're surrounded in this country by whites, by Catholics, by all kinds of people, by institutions.
I think this is another one of those times when we're not going to finish in the next 30 seconds.
We got to finish in 30 seconds?
Okay.
We have gone an hour past the break time, and I've been waiting for the thing when I thought it would end in 30 seconds. So let's take 15.
People read the New York Times, they believe it, you know.
I'm not believing in the New York Times.
I think most of us here resent, you know, the fact that you guys believe that in defining ourselves that you should be involved in the definition of us as black people, as black people, and you were saying, Dick was saying, I think, that unless we deal with you as human beings, in our definition of black people, we're not going to be human if we negate your humanness or something like that.
What we're saying is, all I'm saying is that in this day and age, I think we need each other more than we did before. Because I think the Jews need the blacks, and I think the blacks need the Jews. I don't think you need us to help define your own identity, although I think our experience as a people and as an identifiable ethnic group can be valuable to you.
Why do Jews need blacks?
Jews need blacks because blacks are part of the human race. Okay. And the way blacks are treated is an indication of how humans treat other humans how humans treat Jews.
Okay, so then Jews need Arabs.
Yes, they sure do.
And
That's
Jews
right.
need everybody. Then, the way you put it in that fashion, is the reason that we need him is so that we can carry out our mission. We've got to save somebody. I'm going to save you.
No, we've got to save ourselves.
We've got to save ourselves.
We've got to save ourselves.
Never to save
Why couldn't we save ourselves by first saving ourselves?
Because that's part of it. We've done that already fairly well.
No. Wait a minute. We haven't saved ourselves in my judgment. My judgment doesn't mean that to be saved means to belong to the club. To be saved means to have a big house. To be saved means to be financially secure. I don't accept that notion of being saved. If I say to the Jews, if I want to say to the Jews, be saved, Jews, then I would have to say a totally different kind of thing. Be saved, Jews, means don't think that the goddamn house is so important. Don't be so hung up about, belonging to the Hillcrest Country Club or living in the Golden Ghetto. Every rabbi in the United States and every Jewish organization in the United States and every Jewish philanthropic and fraternal institution in the United States would say to itself, our problem as Americans is to try to discover how affected we have been by the American notions of racism. Then we would be saving ourselves. And incidentally, maybe, we might help them. Maybe.
The trouble with that is it's too contemplative.
And what you're indicating, Paul, is not going to be available from the Jewish community. The Jewish community, right now, at any rate, is not going to join in a revolution.
Right.
Okay.
So when I'm saying then, let's stop kidding ourselves.
Yeah, I'm being
about
honest.
how we're going to help the blacks.
All right, Rabbi.
We're not going to help the blacks.
Because you're assuming that the only way you can help the blacks is by revolution. And
No.
I tell you,
No.
well then
I'm assuming that.
well,
If you ain't ready to join the revolution, what the hell are we need you for?
I think the difference is right there. I'm glad you said it, because I think that what you have done, I think you put your finger on a,
the whole topic
on a
this
very...
Don't join it, but watch it.
4 hours ago.
On a very important difference between the Jewish community as a corporate body, if anybody can speak for it, and the black power or the black movement, the movement. That is, the Jews, the Jewish community, believes, rightly or wrongly, that the system can be improved, reformed. The difference is that those whites and those Jews who feel that the system can be improved by revolution, by reform and improvement, those people find themselves, and I find myself, frightened by the idea of revolution.
You know, it's like I got some real strong feelings that one of the things that's happening here, and it's been happening since the civil rights movement, where a great number of Jews came into that movement, and the very things you talk about that are Jewish ideals but not Jewish practices as I see it. Because I can just show you Jewish communities that went yes on 14 because they said property values were more important than human beings, etc. And the idealism of the Jewish youth, not being able to vent itself in the Jewish community, turned to the black movement, the civil rights movement, for integration into it. Now, black people have come to the conclusion after that movement, and so did the whites, that America ain't about, never has, and in the foreseeable future isn't about to absorb any group of color. She absorbed you because you're white, even though you are a Jew. To a much larger extent than she could absorb the Indian, who was the original cat here, the Puerto Rican, the black, the Filipino, you name me a group of color, America never took them in. And they've built their institutions around that racism. That's what we call institutionalized racism. And really what we as blacks are doing is kind of gnawing at that idealism that you see in your religion, you see, and you see in your supposed way of life, and in very fact, you have been co-opted. The majority of the Jewish community, as I see it in this country, and that's the big difference I've seen between an American Jew and an Israeli Jew, is that you have been co-opted. You are just another hunky at this point. But underneath, you still have those kind of dreams. Now you're caught in between your material over here and your dream over there. And you're kind of saying to the black, hey man, hey, can't we find another way where I can accommodate both? Me and Paul get along very good because I think we understand full well that there's going to have to be some basic changes made in the economic system of this country. And more important, and which I think hits smack dab in the middle of Jewish ideology, there's going to have to be a basic change of how human beings are viewed in this country. Because there's one thing the black community will tell you, and we know, that dollar bills in this country right now are more important than people. Property is more important than people. Now, you know that runs smack dab in contradiction to what you would like to believe, right? But in fact, you're caught in the trap of that materialistic jazz. And we want to find a way, and this is simply what we mean by black revolution. I hope we can do it peacefully. We want to find a way where we can have the benefits of the technological society, like my tooth was just hurting, darn it, I don't want no witch doctor. I want that stuff right there, it knocked it out. When I came east, I flew on a jet that got me here in 3 hours and something. I don't want a covered wagon, but I also want my Friday and Saturday night. And I want to be able to relate to him as a brother and not as a dollar bill or a commodity. She's my sister, and we want to have our primary relationship and groove. At the same time, we can have our economy. And that's our economical advantages. And that's the challenge right now to the Judaism itself, I think.
I think that's true.
And we're annoying the hell out of you.
I'll say this, every one of us at a different point are going to say, well, this far and no further. I don't think the Jewish community is with you when you say this far and no further. I agree with you. We're not at that point with you.
How do we begin to extricate ourselves from this kind of dilemma? It's by first controlling a very basic institution in society, namely the educational. This is the reason we've singled that one out. But that's not the only institution we're interested in. We're interested in the totality of the black community.
John, I hope by this time, I don't think it was necessary to have this meeting tonight to understand it, because I think you already did understand it, that when there are stores in Harlem, it's not the little Jewish storekeeper who's gouging the black man in Harlem. It may be Chase Manhattan Bank that owns a property and owns a lot of condemned property too. It's not the Jew, by and large, who exploits. And I think that kind of defensive posture might be necessary to be said again and again, because apparently it isn't understood.
Dick, how come you never had this conversation with him before this scene here in Washington? I mean, you two guys live in New York. You know, he's been a central figure in a hell of a controversy. You're the assistant director of an agency that's been directly involved in it. How come that you never picked up?
How can he have a conversation? He's not even talking to Mark Rudd.
Yeah, but no. Well, oh yeah, but I can't do anything about the Mark Rudd thing. Here, it takes a television program, you know, to take you down to Washington and him down to Washington, and for the first time you're having a conversation. I'm listening to you guys talking to each other. I think to myself, what a thing this is. What's the matter with you? You couldn't pick up the phone and say to him, "Hey, Hatchet, I read in the paper about that you put out about Jews. Why don't we sit down and talk about that?"
That's what I said. I'd learned.
I should have
Okay,
done
I learned
that.
that tonight. I learned that from John tonight, and I'm very grateful.
I want to know. Wait, I want to know.
Israel did it.
I want to know.
And look at the trouble we had getting you there.
I'm not a black man.
We are not blacks. You cannot expect the Jew to be a black.
I didn't ask the Jew to be a black. I asked the Jew to try to understand that, baby, you getting it worse than me.
We are trying to understand, and we are trying to help.
Maybe you missed the point. Maybe you missed the point.
In the black community, vis-a-vis Jews,
What's
is
that?
this.
Yeah.
The tenacity of the feelings, or the pervasiveness of the feelings, the surfacing of the feelings is due to this. When Les Campbell read the poem on WBAI, and Rose Shapiro got up and clacked with her false teeth, she comes out along with a rabbi whose name I can't recall, and I think it was Eisendrath, and some other prominent Jewish figures, and says, without reservation, Les Campbell is racist, anti-Semitic, etc., and Les Campbell must be fired from his position for reading that poem. When she says this is not lost on the black community.
John, can I explain why Jews took offense at that? Granted that the poem was granted that the poem was a valid expression of the way this girl felt, but Campbell was her teacher. He read the poem, was one of his, and the way he read it on the program and his comments before and after indicated that he approved of that. He approved of a sentiment by a child that said, "I wish you were Jew with a yarmulke on your head, I wish you were dead." Now, can you understand? I ask you to try to understand what that means to a Jewish teacher, or to a Jewish parent, or to 3 million Jews, or whatever number there are in New York, when the teacher, who was supposed to be training the mind of this child, apparently encourages and approves of that kind of sentiment. Now, can you understand, really, I want to get closer to you, can you understand what it feels like, having known that 6 million of your kin were killed in this generation over there, and somebody writes a poem? I don't blame the child feels that way. I blame the teacher for not saying, here's the poem that this child read. She feels this way. It's terrible. We've got to do something to train this child not to hate. Isn't that important to you, to train children not to hate?
Yeah, why didn't you go talk to this guy? Why are you talking to the television audience about this guy? Why don't you go talk to him directly? You see, it seems to me that just in this kind of thing that's happening here, it seems to me that if this is the way the New York City school, the debate about the New York City school system has been carried on, it's no wonder the goddamn school system has blown up in that fashion. You people aren't talking to each other. You're talking for the benefit of the press, and you're talking for the benefit of the television, and you're talking for the benefit of the ads in the newspapers. You're talking for everybody except yourselves. That's probably true to some extent of the blacks as well as it's true of you.
Now spent, what, almost 10 hours together here. And we have looked at a lot of incidents that have happened in the communities from which we come, and some of our thoughts and feelings. And now if we can focus it in on and what is the net result of spending time this way for us and our feelings and reactions about each other, and what other kinds of issues would have to be looked at and dealt with before relationships moved further, which is really the issue.
I have learned, I think, a lot. I feel that I relate to John, who was just a name before tonight to me, and who, I think, Paul, you're right. I think I should have called him and tried to meet with him in New York instead of issuing a news release attacking him. And if this session in the pit has taught me anything, it has taught me that I should have done that, and that I hope next time he writes an article that I ought to call him, or perhaps now that he knows me, he might not write it in the very same way. I think I've tried to get across something to Lou. I don't think I understand Lou very well. I don't know why. I think Lou is a revolutionist and wants to just tear everything down, and that simply isn't my personal way of looking at it. Laurie, I think you're trying to adopt a kind of a real tough guy attitude, a real hardline position, because you think it's the right way to act. I don't think, and this is very presumptuous of me, I don't think you really feel it. I think that, at least as it comes across to me, I think somehow you've gotten caught up in this dialogue here tonight, almost in a kind of a trying to outdo the other guy kind of business. I think some of the Jewish participants have too, particularly with Paul, because Paul is a superior person. Okay, and then the Queen over here, as somebody called her, with the earrings. I don't know. I'm a very poor judge of women. I think you're very angry at me, and I think you're angry at a lot of people. I think you're probably very angry at a lot of black people too. You strike me as a person of deep feelings, who gets mad and hits and strikes out and reviles probably at times. I would guess that you have a terrible temper.
Yeah, all colored women are that way.
No. I've only lost my temper once in my entire life, just once.
That proves what a lousy judge of human nature is.
But the point is, for a long time, I came from that school where you didn't say anything. You accepted whatever was told you by the adult blacks and especially by the white community. And I never questioned it. I never said a word. And when I got in a position of coming out on my own, some of the thoughts that I'd, put in the back of my mind, because I didn't want to confuse myself, because I had to make it through school, and I had to keep everybody happy so I could. I decided now that I'm taking care of myself, I can express these views, and I'd like to, find out exactly what my other brothers and sisters feel, what the white people that I come in contact feel. And I'm angry, true. I'm angry at anyone who stops me and the black people and the non-white people from having peace. Peace and freedom to me are synonymous. Let me have my freedom and my peace. If you don't, I'm going to be very angry. If you cross me, look out, because I'll get you. Now, that's just the way I feel about it. And regardless of who it is, if you're black and you cross me and you're against my freedom and, you're running around hollering, but I'm a big Negro liberal, you go with the rest of the people.
I can't do this kind of thing, Charlie, because perhaps I should have confessed in advance, and then maybe I wouldn't have been here, that I'm not very groupy. Some people have misread me. I find it very, very difficult to function in a group environment. In fact, I don't get along too well with adults, many of whom are Negro. I come alive mostly in relationship to black children, usually in a classroom setting. Now this is just, me. So I can't go around like this and say how I relate to a particular individual, except to say that on a one-to-one basis, I am more likely to get my point of view across to that person, so that person better understands me as a black person if I'm talking to a white, or if I am speaking, I can speak to a group of people, but this is because I have been trained in that kind of thing. See, I go back to through a long tradition of ministers. Great-great-grandfather was lynched because he dared to preach. See, this is part of the environment in which I grew up. So I can't do this kind of thing except to say that it's not all in vain what we have done. Because if that be the case, then I don't think I would have sat here this long. I'm not being patronizing.
I don't think I've developed any kind of emotional or philosophical or other kinds of feelings toward anyone in the group that I didn't have when the group started. I mean, during the course of this thing.
What were they when you started?
When we started, yeah. I'm glad I participated in this thing, though, because when it comes to, the Jewish participants, I realized a little while ago that I have not really gotten involved in an involved kind of conversation with the type of people that most of this group represents. That is, the white members. I know Jewish radicals. I feel very comfortable with this cat, both and style and lifestyle and the way he comes on, and what he says. He says, the only whites I really deal with, talk to, get involved with are radicals. Otherwise, I don't talk to them unless I have to. It just doesn't seem to be anything to talk about. So I didn't really have an appreciation for the bag that the Jewish community as a whole was in. I'm not. I think it was Dick here, who said something about me as an individual not being. That he didn't believe me. I think is what he was saying. That I'm not really where I've been. I'm not really at the way I've been coming on tonight. That I sort of find rather amusing, an interesting observation, and I just wanted to ask him, why he feels that that I'm not.
It's hard to say. I think because you strike me as being too smart for that. I think you know too much to shut other people out, and it doesn't come across to me that you really mean it when you say or when you indicate to me that you want to shut me out, because I think you know better than to shut me out, and I just had that impression from what you were saying that you weren't as you were coming on, and that you know better.
How do you know I'm too smart to? Maybe it might be a dumb thing. It might be really stupid and really dumb and really way out and all that. to want to isolate myself and deal with myself, as a black man. It may be really stupid and way out on the wrong thing for the black community to do it. But that's what I want to do. That's the way I think it's got to be done. I can't figure out any other way of doing it. And I get annoyed. I really am getting annoyed. I do get annoyed. I've been getting annoyed all night long whenever you guys come up with that kind of thing.
Well, it's very. You were, and just now I didn't think I ever implied that at all. I didn't think Dick had just until right now.
Well, it's difficult to talk about how you relate to other people, and particularly someone as strange to me as you are, because I don't have any contact with black radicals. And without sounding patronizing, and if that sounded patronizing, I didn't mean it.
Would you have said that about me too? You know, I'm too smart for that radical bag? I
No.
assume that that's what you're talking about in his case.
No, not that you're too smart for the radical bag, but that it seems to me that there is a value in bringing people together and not cutting them out. I don't think you cut him out. I think he does, or at least he seemed to. You don't. He does, and it seemed to me that that's so lacking sense and lacking value and self-defeating that I don't believe that he means it.
You and John have not responded in kind to this situation, this experience. And I'm just wondering if this is going to be true of all of you. And I'm asking myself why. Is it, I mean, just because you can't get along in a group doesn't mean you can't respond to a human being.
The rabbi's point is something that concerns me too, and that is, if your reaction, John, and yours were typical, then that tells if it's important, if it's typical, it's important, and if you're not representative, then it doesn't really matter. But what it means is, what it tells the rabbis, I understand it, what it tells me is that the possibility of working together is apparently dismissed by you, not only intellectually, because you don't think that we've got it or will go all the way, but emotionally, psychologically, because you're unable, if your reaction and yours, John, were typical, you are unable to relate to us.
You know, you're making it a Jewish-black confrontation here. I don't agree with you or agree with you. I think it takes a special kind of chutzpah. I mean, I'm using the word, I think, in its right sense. At this point, if there's one thing I learned tonight, or I think I feel, is that to get to know somebody and to get them to know them totally, it will take a hell of a lot more than what we have done now, and that perhaps the one thing that I realize is that gap that I knew existed is much greater and must need much more work than I have or a lot of people have been willing to give. So that to pass off and to say, I judge thee and so forth, is to me something that I don't think one can do. I don't think one can do, and I think one does damage.
One of my problems is, you know, I just don't feel comfortable enough in this group to open up to it again. I've opened up to it before and told you how I felt about black kids in education and how I'd even go against my own value system
I understood
at the starvation point. And what I have gotten back is some intellectualizing. You know, when we throw out the subject of anti-Negro feelings in the Jewish community, we can't really explore that subject, and that hurts me very much.
Yes, we can explore.
Well, we haven't, you see, and all I'm saying is that I don't explore on that one. And the wall, is kind of going up to where, I'm not just ready to open up to this group. I feel no sense of community, very frankly, within the total group. I don't think you. I think you can emotionally and intellectually understand the Mediterranean Sea at the back of the Jew in Israel, and I could. You see, I could sit there and look at that sea and relate very much to it, but I don't think you've accepted the fact that we're up against our Mediterranean Sea too,
I do.
and we feel just as emotional about it, and we are just as desperate.
I grant that.
And, you know, I haven't heard, it's always questioning us about what we're going to do. You know, like you tell me that you think I'm going to tear the system down. Well, you know, I don't think I have to tear the system down. You know, I think you're going to tear yourself down. And if we can just hold out long enough, you know, if we can just survive long enough, most of the work is going to be done, you know. And as far as going along with you, I don't think you really mean that, going along with us. You understand. You know, you haven't asked me to go along with the American Jewish Congress, you know. You understand what we were talking about. There's some things we blacks have to do as blacks. There's some things you Jews have to do as Jews. That doesn't mean we can't get together on every level, other levels. You've tried to twist it around when we say that certain things black people right now have to do with black people. We have to get our manhood and womanhood in a society that is continuing through, like, you know, the school system, to still rob us of that, to still try to make us feel like we're not as good as Caucasians. You know, that's still the emphasis within the schools. That's the genocide we were talking about. You know, that made me come out of school so darn mad that if you called me black, I'd fight you 3 or 4 years ago, and every one of us in this room. And I had an advantage on him because I was lighter than him, you see. And you had us hating ourselves, hating our color, straightening our hair, the whole bit. And what we're saying is we haven't seen that change within the school system. And our kids still, and they have to go outside of that system. So, I don't know. You see, you open up for your gut and how you emotionally feel, and you get intellectualizing and questions like, you know, how are you going to do it? I don't know how we're going to do it, except I know we're going to do it. Now, that's not rational. That doesn't fit within the framework of categorized America today. But you see, you know, I see America as a totally different thing than you see her as.
He thinks I don't understand.
I see America as a place that has never allowed me. Sure, it has accommodated you. It has given you a niche. But I don't see it as that. I see it just as Langston Hughes said, I am the rock on which America stumped her toe at Jamestown long ago. Hell no, I don't get excited at the Constitution, where he talks about his law and order. Hell, it took Article 1 and made me 3/5 of a man. And now it doles out my rights, and those rights, don't you know, when nothing is any more dehumanizing. You're talking about sensitivity and anti-Semitism. How would you like to have been sitting up for the last 10 years and hearing Congress debate how much of a man you're going to be this year? And you have to go through that kind of shit, and that's all it is. You know, and then they turn around and talk about the glorious American dream, and you hear congressmen and senators filibustering your manhood. And all they're saying is they're giving a license to white people. And I know those bills weren't for me. Those bills were to give you, you know, to set the bounds of your conduct towards me. You know, and you see, and I just have to do this because, you know, the humanness ain't going out of us, baby. But we're retreating behind our wall. We're tired of throwing our gut out and back on it, throwing our dreams out, wham, back on it. You see, every time we throw out a dream, you're talking about killers of a dream. Now, that's all we've been talking about, dreams. Now, no real concrete, factual way. We couldn't sit down here on a piece of paper and give you one real concrete way we're going to achieve them, except that we're going to achieve them. And you're going to have to take us on that faith. And we're going to achieve them because we want to achieve them. And, I just, so, I'd like to hear something back from you.
I'm very much moved by what he said, and stirred by it, because I think you have opened up now, as you did a while ago. And you have
that's the point. I felt you were communicating.
You have made me feel uncomfortable because I'm white, and I am part of the structure and part of this system that has dehumanized you, and a small part of it, perhaps not as big as you think, a small part of it, and an even smaller part of that small part is my organization, his organization, others that are trying to do what we can about it. And I can understand, or I'm moved by what you say, and I try to empathize or sympathize or feel that, and all I can't entirely because I haven't lived it. It wouldn't be honest of me to say I know just what you mean, man. I'm with you all the way. I can't say that. I'm trying to be honest with you by saying that I can't feel that I can be stirred and moved and touched by what you just said, and I am. But I can't honestly say I'm going there all the way because I'm with you. My skin is black. It's not black. It's white. And I have. All I'm saying is I'm trying to tell it straight. I'm trying not to be a nice guy and have you like me and say I'm with you all the way. I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I can how limited I am in helping you or in trying to help you. I want to help you. I want to help you more. I think more than you realize, in ways that I don't know how to open up, and I want to. And I'm touched by it, and I want to go, but I can only go as far as I'm able to go. That's all I want to say.
One thing I want to say, please, don't think of it as helping me. Start looking back in and seeing what's happening to you, and fight for you. I want to say one more thing on the whole subject of anti-Semitism. You know, if I learned anything sitting in this group, I certainly don't fit that role. In fact, as far as Caucasians are concerned, and that's where I put a Jew at this point, in this country, Jew, is that I pick. I'm almost like I don't like white people, except my list is growing. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
As a blanket statement, no, I don't trust. You know, that's the dual thing that you got on John about earlier, but if you watch us, that's the way we operate. Right in the middle of a sentence, I can switch from you individual to you group, you see. And no, white people as a whole, I don't trust. But my list of whites who I will work side by side with is growing. And I mean, that's about as far as it can go.
All I say is,
and I will attack a black
Yeah.
who tries to kill my dream, and I don't care if you call me anti-black. I will attack a Jew who tries to kill my dream, and I'll just carry the little cross of anti-Semitism or any other group. But right now, man, you got to understand, we're up against that seat, and some black cats have strapped their on and have made some very serious commitments. And there are some whites who understand that that's the same box they're in, and in fact, your job is going to be harder than mine, because as brothers say, we starting from ground zero. In fact, in some cases, -0, and we have nothing to lose. Your problem is going to be, how are you going to get your freedom when you have vested interest in the very system that's stifling your freedom?
That is a problem.
And
all I say to you,
I understand that.
When we try to help or to work side by side or whatever way you want to use it, and don't hurt because I say help. Work with or whatever way. Try to understand, just as we must understand, the depth of your despair and desperation and everything else, as you've said it. Try to understand too that we want to help.
Dick, would you just try to read back what you think he was saying to you about the word help? Because I'm not sure that you understood that.
I understood him to take offense at my use of the word help.
Why?
Because I interpreted him to have understood, he interpreted my use of the word help as kind of condescension.
No, isn't it that
and
it's
wait a
his
minute.
problem and not yours?
Yeah, and
He's saying it's your problem.
Yeah, and well, I don't know, and that he's got to do it
The rabbi
himself.
is dead on target.
Yeah, what did you say? I'm sorry.
every time you
Let the rabbi repeat that.
Yeah, what do you say,
Dead on
Rabbi?
target.
Well, you're inferring, as I understood it, which I wouldn't go along with. It's his problem. You're going to help him solve his problem. He's saying, no, it's your problem.
Well,
something else.
I think that's a phony intellectual formulation.
wait.
I really do. It's his problem. It's his problem
and your
yeah,
problem.
Sure. But
I suppose you accept, would you accept this? There is no way my problem can be solved by you and I working on my problem. I am a symptom, and only a symptom, of the bigger problem. Do you see? You're not going to free America by concentrating on Harlem and Watts. Southside Chicago is my argument. If we
That's a very
deal
basic
with that
point.
outside place, we're only a symptom. Get rid of the germ and the syphilis bump will go away. Don't treat the bump, man, because then the germ will have a chance of getting in the spinal column and killing the body. You feel we're coming to wipe you out. Right. That we're being programmed to be the American Nazi to do you in.
Oh, well, whatever, yeah.
No, I don't feel that. I don't feel that. But I do feel this.
Do you think that can happen? You think we can be programmed and manipulated?
No, I don't think you can be manipulated. You manipulate yourself. I do think that if you get desperate enough and mad enough and wild enough, that some of you may decide they're in the way, let's not bother. Let's not bother being careful. I think that possibility exists. That I think you've said it tonight in so many words, that may be the case.
Certainly, blacks have been attacking the economic system within their community very violently. And it happens to be a lot of them cats caught in that box were Jews. Oh, yes, that's already started. Okay.
We are at a point where we ought to make a decision of whether we stop or go on. It's just 2 o'clock. One possibility would be to take a few minutes if anybody else wanted to have their final say. Another would be to let it roll and see where we go with it.
I'd like to say just one thing. It's very interesting that we started out talking about anti-Semitism in the black community and ended up talking about the whole society as a whole. And it's not a separate issue. I don't think it's an isolated issue. And there are going to come times when blacks and Jews are going to rub each other. I hope this has shown that it's not the anti-Semitism, Christ killer type of thing. It's going to be those rubs are going to take place. And I don't want, it would just be tragic if we got sucked into a battle, whether it's Time magazine or whoever it may be, is making that appear that it's an anti-Semitic thing in the sense that blacks are out to get Jews. It is just, and a transfer of power that needs to take place. There are going to come those rubs between blacks and Jews and blacks and everybody else, even blacks and Negroes. That rub is going to take place. And that certainly doesn't mean we're anti-black, does it? You see, and I just want to make that clear. And I understand, your paranoia at times, but because I have a little button I wear sometimes that says even paranoids have real enemies. So, kind of keep your guard up. But in this case, I'll just tell you from what I've seen, no planned or concerted or even the beginnings of a plan to smash Jews because they are Jews. Do you follow me?
Yeah, but
we don't have the time.
Sure, but
we're
the
on
outcome
something
is
else.
that,
some Jews may get rubbed. Some blacks will get rubbed in that. We're not going to call you anti-Negro when we get rubbed.
They're going to be all different groups of people from ethnic backgrounds are going to get rubbed. We, as a black group of people, don't have time to jump on the Jews per se. We're out to save what we can of this country and ourselves first.
We didn't break a record, did we? What's the longest marathon?
Depends on which issue.
I like my sleep too well to even keep track.
We done?
Done.
Everybody's good health before they do.
L'chaim. Need a ride?
Huh?
How'd you get here?
Station one.
There is a...
I got the car.
This is NET, the Public Television Network.